Disclosure: I was invited by the Military History Museum of the Bundeswehr in Dresden. The schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper is probably one of the most boring German vehicles of the Second World War, yet its history provides us with interesting insights and a better understanding of the German armed forces. Or in marketing speak, this vehicle is absolutely essential for the understanding of the Nazi war machine. Now, if you like emotionally charged phrases like the last one, you are probably on the wrong channel. Yet if you like a sober analysis that is often based on German academic literature or even research that I conducted myself in the German military archives, you are on the right channel. And this video, like many hundreds before, was made possible by my supporters on Patreon and Subscribestar. Without supporters, I would not be able to keep bringing you this sort of content. If you look at the schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper, literally meaning heavy Wehrmacht tractor, it looks quite different from the various other German half-tracks. It looks quite cheap. Additionally, unlike most others, its production started during the war. These points are very important, since the Wehrmachtschlepper served a specific purpose. Let us take a short look at what came before. The first generation of German military half-tracks was introduced between 1934 and 1938. Here is a short overview of 6 different types. The towing capacity ranged from 1 to 18 metric tons, so quite a wide range. How these vehicles looked like? Well, here you can see the smallest and biggest one passing by at Militrex 2019. Although they look rather similar, there were 6 different companies involved, so we have already quite a complicated setup. As a result, already in 1937 the Heeres Waffenamt, the Army's Ordnance Office, called for a new generation of vehicles. They should have better performance, a simplified design, yet more importantly the number of types should be reduced. Originally 7 types were planned, although this time it ranged from a towing capacity of 0.4 to 35 metric tons. Yet with one exception, most of these vehicles were never mass produced. Some did not even leave the development stage. The only exception was the famous Kettenkrad, which had, depending on the source, a towing capacity of 350 to 450 kg. Since the first generation half-tracks were further used, there were now 7 types, so one could say the situation got worse when it came to standardization. As such, Dr. Hettler notes, only the 3rd generation of half-tracks drew together all the experiences from the different campaigns and included only 2 types. This program was initiated in 1942 and envisaged the following types: leichter Wehrmachtschlepper, developed by Adler, schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper, developed by Büssing and NAG. So one could think we are going from 7 types to 2 types. Well, nope. The idea was to replace the 1 and 3 ton variant with the light Wehrmachtschlepper, and the 5 and 8 ton variant with the heavy Wehrmachtschlepper. So from 7 types to 5 types. Well, in theory. The light Wehrmachtschlepper was never introduced. Some prototypes were built, but since the famous, or rather infamous, Raupenschlepper Ost was introduced, the project was cancelled. For more information on the Raupenschlepper Ost, or better its infamous variant, see this video. Yet back to the number of types. So the intention was to go from 7 to 5 types. There's just one problem: this never really happened. I came across a document from January 1944 about the armament production. It has a section titled Zugkraftwagen und schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper, so towing vehicle and heavy Wehrmacht tractor. Interestingly enough, the Wehrmachtschlepper is not really mentioned in the text, but only in the tables. Yet the text itself is very interesting. To quote one part, without the required 18-ton towing vehicle as towing equipment, tanks are irresponsibly lost. Therefore, the General Staff of the Army has had to decide to request an increase in the production of towing vehicles by almost double compared to 1943. In this connection, the position is taken that the other capacities can be offered by dispensing with the equipment previously manufactured there. This also answers the question why the type with 80 metric tons towing capacity was not removed. It was needed to pull panzers. The next page contains a table with the then current types and the future types. It looked as follows. As you can see, it is back to 7 types. But you need to consider this table does not contain the Kettenkrad. So it would be actually 8 types. Yet the towing vehicle with 35 metric tons capacity was not introduced. According to Hettler, it was replaced with the Bergepanther. Yet remember the light Wehrmachtschlepper should replace the 1 to 3 ton variant. Those are still there. Whereas the heavy Wehrmachtschlepper should replace the 5 to 8 ton variant. Only the 5 ton variant is removed from the future list. So let us look at the vehicle itself, or better, how it compares to the other previously mentioned half-tracks, because there were some fundamental differences in the whole design philosophy. The original half-tracks from the first generation were specialized for different purposes. They were fast, and if you look at the basic layout, you can see that the superstructure and other elements contained various elements that were complicated and less suited for mass production. Meanwhile, the schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper looks rather simple, and looks are not deceiving here. The schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper was cheaper and easier to produce. The engine was the same as in the variants for 1 or 3 tons, while the Wehrmachtschlepper could pull 8 tons. Of course, its maximum speed was less, 27.4 km per hour on the road and 18.3 km per hour cross country. Meanwhile, the other had a maximum road speed of at least 50 km per hour. The lower performance in terms of speed had actually a benefit: the tracks. The tracks of the Wehrmachtschlepper were simple. They were not lubricated in contrast to those of the various other German half-tracks. Additionally, these earlier tracks also had rubber pads, and Germany had a severe lack of rubber. So due to the lower speed, simpler tracks could be used. As such, the tracks of the Wehrmachtschlepper were simpler, less resource intensive, and also did not require as much maintenance. The cross-country mobility likely suffered from the simpler construction. Data sheets from the army show that the cross-country range was just 100 km in comparison to 300 km on the road. Meanwhile, various other half-track variants mentioned before usually had a cross-country range that was generally only 50% lower. As you can see on this schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper, there are 2 different kinds of wheels. The closed wheel was the original one, but due to material shortages, the spoked wheel was introduced. These spoke wheels were called material-saving spoke wheels, and simplified manufacturing drastically since it did not require a press or heat treatment. I'm not sure, but I suspect that these simple sprocket wheels probably were not an option for the other faster half-tracks. There are sprocket wheels on the Kettenkrad, but it is a very light vehicle. Additionally, I've seen larger half-tracks with sprocket wheels, but they look far more robust and complicated. Now Dr. Jens Wehner from the Military History Museum of the Bundeswehr in Dresden will give some more information about their schwerer Wehrmachtschlepper, since it has a rather ahistorical configuration.
The schwere Wehrmachtschlepper in the Military History Museum in Dresden is mostly original but not complete. It was restored by the National People's Army, so by the Communist Army of Eastern Germany, for the then new Army Museum of East Germany of the GDR. It was thought to be shown with a heavy motor in pulling situation. So the schwere Wehrmachtschlepper should be shown, and behind this should the heavy mortar. What did the National People's Army do? They restored it in a tank repair workshop, so quite experts, and we don't know for sure. We think that most of the parts are original. You can see it if you look closely to the metals here, and especially we are not sure for the wheels, because the wheels seem to be out of the time, so World War II, but they are very different. As you can see, there are some wheels with much space and some wheels with not so much space. Wheels of both kinds were used during World War. Those wheels were mostly used of material issues, so to save material, to keep it cheap, to save material. And it is also possible that they were combined already during World War II, but it's also possible that they were combined after World War II. So this is not completely clear, but we think that the wheels at least are out of the time. As I said, just not completely clear if they were combined already in the war or afterwards. We also don't know how this vehicle survived the war. It is possible that it was, I don't know, in a barn or something like this until it was discovered in the 60s or 70s. But it's also possible that it was still used after the war for civilian use, maybe in the woods to pull trees that were for the economy, or in other economical states. It's highly unlikely that it was used by private, because in the GDR this wasn't possible for several reasons to use a Wehrmachtschlepper private. But in the economy sphere, it's possible that it was used there. It's also a little bit possible that it was used by the army itself, or that it was at least in a depot of the army and forgotten there or something like this. But as I said, we don't know, but at least the East German army restored it in the 60s.
Be aware there was also a partially armored variant as well. It looked a bit like this. Here's a description with more details. The engine hood and driver's cabin were protected by a carbon steel structure that provided protection against splinters and small arms fire. The carbon steel plates were bolted onto a frame in the area of the radiator and engine, and of welded construction in the area of the driver's cabin. This variant was also used for a version of the Panzerwerfer 42, although according to Hettler it was never produced in series. We know that at least 2 models were built. There was also a variant that mounted anti-aircraft guns, which was ordered in rather large numbers, so beside the regular supply variant, this was the second most variant. Let us take a short look at the production numbers. The initial demand in June 1942 was noted at 7,484 heavy Wehrmachtschlepper. Yet this number was not reached at all. Be aware that the first prototype was finished in December 1943. Needless to say, the planned numbers changed several times. So how many were actually produced? Well, including the prototypes, according to Hettler, a total of 800 were accepted by the army. But these numbers don't include March to May 1945. As such, the total number was likely higher. Additionally, the number of accepted vehicles was lower than the produced number. According to a primary source from 11th April 1945, in March 1945, 25 Wehrmachtschlepper were produced and 15 repaired. Interestingly enough, the vehicle is not mentioned in the War Production Emergency Program, which I discussed in this video a while ago. The program gives a good explanation why the many different types of vehicles were also a result of the composition of the German automotive industry. It is known that the non-uniform setup of the German motor vehicle companies does not allow to limit to these few types. Therefore, we ask a Chief of the Armed Forces Motor Transportation for an opinion on A. What extreme limitation of German vehicles types can be proposed without limiting the efficiency of the German production capacity still in operation? B. What extreme production of motor vehicles of all types still seems possible at all? To summarize, the Wehrmachtschlepper program was an attempt to reduce the large number of different half-tracks used in the Wehrmacht. Additionally, the new half-track should be cheaper and faster to produce. The initial planned numbers of around 7,500 did not include replacement vehicles. Considering that less than 1,000 were produced, shows that the project was clearly not successful. A myriad of different half-tracks was used until the end of the war. I hope you learned something new. Thank you to Jens Wehner for the interview. Thank you to Andrew for viewing the script and providing feedback. Thank you to the Military History Museum of the Bundeswehr in Dresden for inviting me. Special thanks to all my supporters for making trips to the museum and military archives possible. As always, sources are listed in the description. Thank you for watching and see you next time.